Welcome back to the third episode of the podcast titled Kukosha Kwemukadzi, where we are investigating women land access, particularly in rural and urban areas within Africa. So in this particular episode is titled Kuvandura Zvinu Zviriko Zviripo Zvinongonzwa Mwanda Mumaru Veza Zimbabwe. In other words, we're unpacking the existing land allocation systems in the rural areas of Africa. So then the particular authors that have influenced or inspired this episode are Kate Baldwin, who speaks about the paradox of traditional chiefs in democratic Africa, as well as Gideon Kusi, who speaks about the challenges and perceptions of land acquisition in Accra, Ghana, and how we should find ways to make it easier and safer for women to gain access to land. So I think before we actually get into this topic, we first have to unpack who has control over land allocation. I think let's start off with our urban areas. So then do you guys just want to, I think we should unpack who basically has the power to allocate land to a particular person within an urban area. So I don't know, Ipiling, do you want to go first?
Okay. I don't really know. I'm kind of gonna just what I think, when I look, is this Zimbabwe in particular, right?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. It's okay. I'm not really sure, but if I were to think about it, I think modern areas are regulated more by law rather than customary. So I think that it would go through a process of applying for a deed, going to the deeds office, having an attorney kind of help you with the process of gaining access to land, buying land and owning it. And I think it would go through a process of, moving from one owner to the other through a legal process and through court processes and having that deed under your name. I would assume that it would be more law regulated rather than customarily regulated. That's what I think.
You're absolutely right, Ipiling. That's actually the process of acquiring land in an urban area within Zimbabwe. So then essentially you apply to the title deeds offices and you go through that whole process of acquiring the land. You're absolutely right. Lungile, do you have anything else you'd like to add on in terms of land acquisition in an urban area? Or are you okay? Or do you agree, in other words?
Yeah, I actually agree with Billing on how the processes works. The urban areas are governed by the civil law, whereas the rural areas are governed by the customary law. I think urban areas it will be a much more easier process to get land. You just need to have the money, have the resource to buy the land, and then you get the land. Whereas in the other part, you have to go through another system of begging, pleading, or whatsoever to say why you want this land. Yeah, I have nothing further to add other than agree with what Ipeling has explained on how urban access to land in urban areas works.
I think that's such an interesting way to explain how people acquire land in rural areas. Because you're right, they actually do have to cry and beg half of the time, which is very unfair. Because men, okay, let's highlight who we're speaking about. So the people that usually have to cry and beg are women, and that's not fair. Because a man can just simply go to a chief and he'll be like, "Oh no, I want access to a particular piece of land," and most of the time they'll be granted that land. So I think now let's unpack the land allocation system within rural areas. So in rural areas, what happens is, let's say, for example, me, Sihle, right? I've never been married. I've never been married. I don't have children or anything. me, myself, acquiring land today would be a very difficult process because of the patriarchal system that we've highlighted in our previous episodes, right? Because of predominantly customary law. So what happens in like rural areas is that we have a chief essentially who's in charge of land allocation in that particular village or community, right? So then the chief is the one that makes majority of the decision, as to who gets what land, what plot size they're going to get and stuff like that. And usually like the court isn't necessarily involved in that. They just maybe take directives or from the chief and they go off of like whatever the chief says. So I want to like unpack to what extent this limits, right, the access of land for women, particularly in those rural areas. Let's have divorced women as our analysis point, right? Let's create a scenario. Let's say I've just been divorced and maybe I am fighting for land against my husband, whom I've been married to, let's say maybe for 50 years. And we've both like worked very hard and we've both worked very hard towards acquiring this piece of land. We've worked hard towards producing money, which is what we discussed in the other episode. We both worked hard towards towards like ensuring that we're producing crops and we're selling them and stuff like that, right? And then we get divorced. And now I'm in a situation where I potentially could walk away with literally nothing, although I've spent half of my life building up this particular piece of land and contributing to it. So I just wanted to like unpack the dynamics that chiefs cause and how unfair this is in terms of patriarchy and stuff like that. Ipileng, do you want to go first?
Okay. Okay, definitely it's unfair, that a woman will contribute equally or more or less. It doesn't matter. She contributes to the land and what it produces and what it does for them. But still, the chiefs will opt to give most of the rights, 90% of rights, all the rights and ownership of the land to the man. It's very unfair. And like I don't know what else to say. Maybe I didn't hear your question properly, but for me, that's where I would leave it. That definitely it's very unfair because a woman is equally entitled to that land. She worked hard on the land. What makes her different from the man? What makes a man more worthy to take that land and take ownership of the land? And it just goes back to patriarchy. It goes back to how women are stigmatized, how women are seen. We are seen as not being able to be smart enough to handle land. We are domesticated into simplistic roles. We are assumed to not be able to think, to strategize, to be political, to be strategic. Like it just shows how women are viewed. It's not even about what does the man have. Is he great? Is he powerful? Is he smart? This particular man. It's in general. What is the view? What is the conception that these traditional men and traditional societies have of women? And that is that of being a child. There's a childlike inferior view when it comes to women. We cannot, there's a limited capacity when it comes to certain things. That's how women are viewed. And that's why the land ownership is more favorable to, not even more favorable, because that leaves that language even leaves for interpretation that some women can have. No, in general, the chiefs will give the land ownership to males 99% of the time.
Yes.
And it's not because of that man. Is he powerful? Is he a politician? It's not even because of that particular man. It's generally because of the notion that they have about women in general.
Thank you so much for that. So Lungile, I just want to find out from you, right? To what extent you think we should like continue to implement these systems where we have basically a chief allocating land in rural areas? So do you think this is like something we should completely discard of, or should we like maybe alter it and tweak it a bit here and there? Because half of the time, if you have like for example, a male chief, chances that they're going to like side with another male are usually very high. So then what do you think about this? Do you think we should completely discard of this particular land allocation system, or should we, alter it or make changes and stuff like that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe during this episode, I'm very clear that I do not agree with the current modern, or rather the modern customary law that we follow because of its influences and its roots and its particular structure, which was structured by Lord Philopathus Shepton. Should we disregard or remove customary law or the part where it talks about land? It's a debate that I can't enter since I'm not from the rural areas. It's a debate from the people in the rural areas that can talk about the people in those communities that they can talk about since it governs them. But from my perspective, yeah, we should. I mean, it disadvantages women. Ipeleng here had explained that was explaining to us the biggest obstacles and hurdles that stop women from acquiring land in the rural areas. And all these things that Ipeleng was saying are rooted in this traditional belief that women belong in the kitchen, that women do not have the necessary capacity to take care of a home. They are not the head of the family. And then also, I think I read an article here that says with custom, especially in Zimbabwe, in rural areas, it mostly prevents women from seeking employment. Understand? Because simply because they should they should they should what's this they should take care of the home. But if you're taking care of the home, are you not capable of taking care of the land? I mean, the home sits on top of the land.
Exactly.
And so, it's contradictions that you are seeing here, that woman belongs in the households. It's a house. Woman must be a housewife. Yet, who takes care of those housewives? And I think there was a case here in June 2021 or June 2020, whereby, well, this happened in I think in the urban areas of Zimbabwe, whereby the wife had taken, during the dissolution of their divorce, the wife had taken the husband to court to say, you know what, let's share our house, both our properties in 50-50, whereby the husband was saying that since one property is registered in me, I take 100%, and the other property that is registered in both our names, you must get 10% of it. And it didn't make sense. Why must I get 10%? And you, out of all the two properties that are within our marriages that were acquired through our marriage, I only get 10% of only even one house, and then you get 100% and you get 90% of the other house. It didn't make sense. And in the court, they did say that, well, the woman was entitled to 50% of the land. Is either they buy each other out or the house will be sold. And the case by the Supreme Court in Zimbabwe was regarded as a historic win for women's equality in access to land. So perhaps we should, what needs to happen, because since we have this notion that customary law is rooted in our traditions, in our cultures, and our traditions and cultures mean a lot to us as people, especially as African people. Even though I can argue that, well, this customary law that we follow is not necessarily rooted in our tradition. It's rooted in the British native laws that they created to govern us. But what we can do is that we can rather challenge these challenge the customary law in courts, and the civil law or the constitution takes supremacy over the customary law. So perhaps it's time for rural women to challenge to challenge these laws in courts, and maybe someone needs to step forward. to help rural women, to give them the resources, especially in Zimbabwe, to give them the resources to say, hey, let's go and let's go to court to challenge why you are disposed of your land, why you have to go back to your parents' house just because your husband divorced you for a younger woman. Doesn't really make sense. Like perfect example of this, I think I mentioned it in the other episode, was that women in KZN took the chiefs or the king, the chiefs and indunas to court to say we can have land, because if we have land, if we can have land, we can't have land. Like they couldn't own land, because if they didn't bore or had male children within their marriages or whatsoever, that land would have to go to the uncles of the brother of her husband or whatsoever. And if maybe if maybe they were the only child within their family, like the only girl child, the only child within their family, their maternal home or their home whereby they grew up in would then be diverted to also one of the family members who was a male. They couldn't own the land, and they took it to court to challenge that, to say no, we can't. We have to own land. This is our land. What then happens if I don't have male children? Then I'm not supposed to have a home. Then obviously they won that case in the High Court in KZN to say women can own land. They even the case even further extended that chiefs actually, according to the traditional customs of the people of the Zulus, the chiefs and the king do not own the land. Rather, the king administers the land on behalf of the people. So they can't necessarily restrict land to people, to say no, we are restricting it to people, because they don't own the land. The land is owned by the people. And it was argued on the basis that on this phrase, the Zulu phrase, that inkosi gabantu. So a king is a king because of the people, not because not because that he is the king from whatsoever, the authority of whatsoever that you got it from, but his authority comes from the people. So well, I think what needs to happen, because it's going to be a very difficult task for us to dispose of customary law, is for civil organizations to help, especially women, rural women, to say let's challenge these things in court. Let's challenge them, and maybe obviously once you challenge them, because of judicial precedents, because of the once a court decision has been made, it sometimes effectively is the law. Then maybe it will challenge how allocation of land will be administered by the chiefs in any rural areas, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Zimbabwe, whether it's anywhere else. Maybe it will change that. So maybe that's the route we need to take, challenging customary law with civil law. Since civil law grants women the right, then let's challenge customary law through the civil courts and win over it. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
I think, yeah, that's actually very accurate, Lungile, and I completely agree with everything that like you've highlighted. So then, Ipileng, do you have anything else you'd like to add on, or are you good?
Yeah, no, I also agree so much with literally everything Luile has said. Like even that case, like it's known, it's judicial precedent. So in other cases that are similar to this, that law will be quoted and will be used. So it's very important. And yes, I agree as well that customary law is very limiting towards women, especially divorced women, especially there's no provision. And when I was reading more on customary law within Zimbabwe, I realized that they have a customary law court, and it's a specialized court where they only deal with customary law. And you would look at study and be like, oh wow, this is great. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have judges that know day to day the lived experience of the customary law and codified customary law. So they're gonna exercise it in the best way, other like more than a like almost like a magistrate's court or constitutional court judge would deal with it. You know, the people who understand the law, who really understand it deeply, will be the one exercising judgment. So you would see that as a beautiful thing. But when I was reading further, it said that it had limited jurisdiction, in the sense that it doesn't adjudicate or deal with cases that that dissolve a customary law marriage if it's under the act. So and that for me was very alarming, right? In the sense that how if they don't deal with divorce, right, it means that there's a limitation in legislation when it comes to how women who are married under the Customary Marriages Act, how their assets will be divided. It shows that there's a limitation in the legislation when it comes to that, which means that if the customary law court does not deal with it, it means they must go to the magistrate's court, right? And if they go to the magistrate's court barely deals with customary law cases. This is in Zimbabwe now, because obviously most of the customary law cases go to the actual court of it, which means that the magistrate's court barely deals with customary law cases. Now, if you as a divorced woman, you cannot go to the customary law court to kind of go through the court processes of a division of assets. If they do not, you must go to a magistrate's court who barely deals with customary law. How much justice will be afforded to the woman? That's the question I ask myself. That if the people who deal with customary law they are limited when it comes to divorce of customary marriages, it means there's a limit in a legislation. And it means that when I go to the magistrate's court, there's also a limit in that sense. That person doesn't deal with customary law, so they don't know the lived realities that women are under. They don't know customary law to that degree. So how much protection will they be afforded? In terms of division of assets, will it be fair at all when it comes to customary law marriages when women are divorcing, you know? So at every single point, whether we're dealing with customary law in the actual specialized court or in a magistrate court, at no point are women covered, or divorced women covered in it, divorced under customary law. In no way are they covered. In no way is a legal protection. On top of that, even the people that are in the customary law court, it's men. The judges are predominantly men. The legal specialists, all of them are predominantly men, and those men are informed by patriarchal beliefs because, like we said, customary law, patriarchy breeds it, you know, patriarchy gives it life, you know. So when we look at things like that in every corner and point, when it comes to customary law regulating a divorced woman's marriage and in terms of division of assets, it's never fair. It never works out.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Vicky Ling. That was, yeah. So then I think we can wrap up this particular episode by basically saying that chiefs have a very important role to play in these processes of like land allocation, where they're supposed to be the custodians of land, right? However, the people in charge of the allocation of this land, particularly in rural areas, for example, our chiefs, they often engage with such land acquisition processes in a very counterproductive manner, which then deeply affects their outcomes, or even in most cases affects the results of like Black women and their lived experiences and their access to land. So then chiefs are supposed to act as the gatekeepers of like large scale land acquisitions, and they're supposed to help like divorced women or investors or even like foreign donors, right? And the state steer the institutional landscape of tenure, which is not only complicated, but they should also prone to social conflicts. So then if anything, I think the whole chiefery and customary law system should then be altered or completely disregarded and taken out in majority of Africa's states and countries, because it's very counterproductive and it really isn't serving everyone. And when you think of like a law that's been set in place, it's supposed to serve to the majority of the population, of which it currently isn't. So then, in other words, I think we should completely discard of that particular land allocation system and implement a land allocation system that then serves to everyone, both men, women, black, white, whatever race you are, gender, sexuality. Yeah, so essentially that's how I think we should wrap up this particular podcast episode. I don't know if anyone else has anything that they'd like to add on before we basically close. Any final words or conclusions or concluding remarks you'd like to make?
I'm good.
Trisha, I agree very much. My final remark is that you should always remember that with customary law, I think Ipile said it limits women, and Mamdani says customary law was that all those who are under it are subject, as well as those who are and subject to death if they have no right.
Lungile, I think we lost you for a bit. Would you mind just repeating what you just said? Okay.
I think hello.
Oh, you're back. Okay, could you please just repeat your concluding remarks again?
Oh, I was saying that I don't know where I ended, but then I said perhaps we should relook at the structure of customary law. I do not necessarily feel it would be it's gonna be a reality where we can remove customary law in its entirety, but rather we should restructure it to give it more liberties to women and to give it more considerations to other people within the community, and for it not to be one-sided, the side of men only. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our panelists, Tipiling and Lungile. And thank you so much to the listeners for joining us in this episode of Kukosha Mukadzi. We hope to see you in the next episode, essentially, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much again, guys. Bye.
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 Welcome back to the third episode of the podcast titled Kukosha Mukadzi, where we are investigating women land access, particularly in rural and urban areas within Africa. So in this particular episode is titled Kuvandura Zvinu Zviriko Zviripo Zvinongonzwa Mwanda